Everybody, welcome into a fun and exciting intermediate math class. My name is Mr. Steve, and I am going to be your teacher for this class. We're going to be using the Abeka book, Intermediate Math. And so what I'll do is in these videos is I will teach the lessons in the videos, and you'll just follow along with me. I'll tell you the page number, and then I'll show you some things on the computer screen here that you'll be able to kind of follow along with. And then after the video, then you can do your work there in your book. Okay? So let's jump right into it. Let's not waste any time. And let's go to chapter number 1 in your book, and that is found on page number 2. Chapter 1, page 2. I know it's weird, right? What's on page 1? Yeah, you're like looking at your book right now. But chapter 1 starts on page number 2. So what we're going to be talking about today in this first lesson, really 3 different topics. Okay, so I'm going to have to be fast to get it all into you. Number 1, place value. Number 2, we're going to be talking about rounding off to those place values that we learned. And then number 3, we are going to talk about the 4 operations of arithmetic. All right, so like I said, what I'll do is I'll just kind of show you my computer screen, and I'll just walk you through some of these things. Here's what I want you to do. As I'm doing this, I want you to take your notebook and I want you to write things down. Do not watch this like you're watching some other YouTube channel where you're just getting entertainment. This is learning, okay? You can learn on YouTube. So one way to do that is for you to take your pencil, right? Get your pencil in your hand, get your notebook, and write down the things that I have written down. If I have them written down, you should have them written down. That way, when you go to do your work later, you'll be able to look back at that notebook and you'll be able to remember the things that I taught you. All right, so let's go ahead and jump down here and look at this. The first topic that we're going to be approaching is place value. All right, what is place value? Well, in the Arabic system, you'll see right down there, I have the word Arabic system. We use what's called a base 10 decimal system. Base 10 means basically that there are 10 digits. There's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The number 10 is 2 digits, right? So there are 10 base digits. 0 is a base digit in the system. 10 is not a base digit, okay? 10 is a 1 and a 0. Now, when you use a 1 and a 0 together, you are using what's called place value, okay? So you are using 2 digits to mean something bigger than you can express with just 1 digit. Let's say that you use 3 digits. Now you're talking about something in the hundreds, right? Because you have the ones, the tens, and the hundreds. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about using these 10 digits to create other numbers, bigger numbers, or smaller numbers. How do we create smaller numbers? We use a decimal point, just a little point. So if I say 1.1, okay, I'm creating a small number that is between 1 and 2. So it's 1 and, we typically say this point. You can say point, but that's not really the technical way to say it. You want to say this, you want to use the word and. So you want to say 1 and 1/10. Okay, so it's not 1 and 1/1. There's no such thing as the oneths place. It's not 1 and 1/100ths or thousandths. So this place value right here to the right of the decimal point is what's called the tenths. If we had another number, so 1 and 12, because that's a 12 right there, right? 1 and 2 together is a 12. You would say 1 and 12 hundredths, because now this is the hundredths place over there. Not the hundreds place, hundredths place. There's a little bit of a difference. Has a TH on the end of it. All right, let's look down here at this place value chart, and hopefully this will make a little bit more sense to you as we talk about these different place values. Okay, so now here is our decimal point right here in our little chart that we have. So if we're writing numbers The first one is the units, or you could also call this, some people call this the ones. Okay, our book calls it the ones place. Okay, the units place is fine, the ones place is fine. Either one there, that's interchangeable. As you go, so let's say we just write the number, well, let's write the number 7. That's just 7 ones. That means I have 7 pencils, I have 7 erasers, I have 7 whatevers. Okay? Now, if I keep going and I put one in the tens place, any number, I could put a 3 in the tens place. Now that means that I have 37, right? So I have 30 tens, or I have 3 tens, so 3 tens, so 10, 20, 30, and then I have a sevens. Okay, so 30 and 7. Then I put something in the hundreds place. Let's put a 2 in the hundreds place. So now I have 2 hundreds, right? So 200, and I still have my 37 down there. So I have 237. Make sure that you don't use the word and. Don't say 237, because remember, this decimal is where we use the word and. A-N-D, we'll put it right there. So when we use a decimal, that's when we'll use the word and. So don't use and after the hundreds. So it's just 237. Don't say 237. If you ever hear me say that in these videos, then I'm saying it wrong. Okay? So the next one is thousands. Let's put an 8 in the thousands place. So now what do we have? Now we have 8,237. Okay? If we go to the 10,000s place, let's put a 4 in the 10,000s place. Now what do we have? Now we have, listen to this, now we have 48, because notice we're in the tens place again. Now it's the 10,000s place, but we're still in the tens place. So what we have is 48, and then we would read 1,237. 48,237. Let's go ahead and add a decimal now. So we'll just put a point right here in the decimal place. So now we're going to read it with the word and, right? Because that's what we read when we get to the decimal place. And then let's do tenths. Let's put a, I'm trying to use different numbers, so we'll put a 1 in the tenths place. Okay, so now the 1 is in the tenths place, the 4 is in the 10,000, the 8 is in the 1,000, the 2 is in the hundreds, the 3 is in the 10, and the 7 is in the ones, or in the unit. Okay, so let's read this number. 48,237 and 1/10. And 1/10. That's kind of the official way to read that number. All right, let's put a 6 in the hundredths place. So now we're going to read it the same way, except for we're going to read this as 16 hundredths. Okay, so now we have 48,237 and 16 hundredths. If we add one more, we'll put a 9 here in the thousands place. So we have 48,237 and 169 thousandths. That's how the numbers are read. Most of you know this. This is review, but I want to spend some time on it so that we can know. Now, what I would do if I was you is I would practice this. I would write down some numbers, just write down a bunch of random numbers, maybe put a decimal point in there, and then practice it. And you can use this chart right here to practice with. All right, and I kind of got a blank one there. You know, I can write a number in there, and then I'll let you practice saying it. So let's put a 4. You can't really see that very well. So let's put a 4,210.89. All right. So what do we have there? Now I've taken the words off there, right? So now you're going to have to kind of figure it out on your own. What are the different place values? Well, we are in the, so this is the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. That's the thousands place. Over here, we were in the tenths, hundredths. So let's read that number. 4,210 and, there's the decimal point, 89 hundredths is how you would read that. 4,210 and 89 hundredths. All right, good. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about rounding. Here's another cool thing about these videos, right? If you didn't get that, you can rewind that and watch it again. And so, you know, if I move on too quickly, go back, rewind, watch it again as you're doing your work, and that can help you. All right, rounding. When we want an approximate number, when we don't really care about the exact number, but we want an approximate or a number that's close, we can do what's called rounding off. So if I have this number right here, 299, but I don't really care if I know that it's exact, or if I don't care that somebody else knows that it's exact, I can use rounding, or I could pick a number that it's really close to. What is this number really close to? Well, 299 is very close to what? 300. Now, 299 is not equal to 300, right? It does not equal 300. 299 is approximate to 300. So we use this symbol right here. I always say that this right here looks like bacon, right? Do you like bacon? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I personally love bacon, okay? So I'm going to call that bacon. So we're going to do 299 is approximately equal. That wasn't a good bacon on the top. There we go. That's a little bit better. Is approximately equal to 300. I rounded it off. Now, I rounded that off in my head, and maybe you did too. But there's other ways that we can do it using place value. So if we come down here, I've got right here, this is a great time to write this down. Pause the video, write all of these steps in your book. I think that's going to be helpful. So steps for rounding. Number 1, identify the digit for the desired place value being rounded. Okay, so are we rounded to the nearest 100? Are we rounding to the nearest 1,000? Are we rounding to the nearest tenth? Okay, are we rounding decimals? What are we rounding off? Number 2, look at the digit to the right to determine if it's 0 to 4 or 5 to 9. So notice here, if it's 0 to 4, then we're going to leave the digit being rounded. We're going to leave it alone and not touch it. If it's 5 to 9, we are going to add 1 to the digit being rounded. Okay, you'll see what that looks like in just a second. Number 3, we want to change all the digits to the right to zeros. All right, so let's do one of those. Let's practice these steps, and then in your book these steps are listed, and then hopefully you wrote them down in your notebook so you can always go back and look at these. All right, so we want to round this number right here. Let's say this number first, right? It's 10,821 and 4,397 ten-thousandths is how you would say that number. So what they want you to do is they say round it to the nearest 100. Okay, we'll start with 100, then the tenths, then the thousandths. Okay, so let's do the hundredths first. Hundreds first. So what we want to do is we want to identify what number is in the hundreds place. Well, the 8 is in the hundreds place. What's step number 2? That was number 1 where we identified it, right? What's step number 2? Step number 2 is we're going to look to the right to determine, is it 0 to 4? Is it 5 to 9? So let's look at the number to the right. I call it his next door neighbor, right? So his next door neighbor is a 2. So next door neighbor to the right is a 2. Let's go back up here. If it's 0 to 4, we're going to leave the digit alone. Let's leave it alone, okay? So we're just going to leave this alone. So here's what you do. You rewrite these numbers. 1, 0, comma, 8. We left it alone. We did not touch the number being rounded. Why? Because his next door neighbor was from 0 to 4. If it was bigger than 4, if it was a 5 or bigger, we would do something else. But for now, we don't need to. What's our next step? The next step is number 3. Change all the digits to the right to zeros. Okay. So the 2 becomes a 0. The 1 becomes a 0. The decimal can stay there. And then we have 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, if you know anything about numbers, if all these numbers over here on the other side of the decimal are zeros, we don't need to write them. So our answer would actually be right here. 10,800. That is to the nearest 100. Let's kind of redo this. I'll just kind of erase this real quick. And let's redo this one, and let's do it to, I'm just going to make one up. I know I read earlier which one the book wanted you to do it to. Let's do it to the nearest thousandth. So we're going to round off to this 9 right here because it's in the thousandth place, okay? So what do? Let's follow our steps, okay? So we're going to go back up here, and we're going to identify the number being rounded. Okay, we've got that. It's in the thousandth place. Number 2, we want to look to the digit to the right. So come over here. We're going to look at his next door neighbor to the right. It's a 7, okay? So let's go back up here. If it's 0 to 4, we leave it alone. It's not. It's between 5 and 9. It's a 7. So what does it say there? We're going to add 1 to the number being rounded. Oh, interesting. This one's very interesting, and I wanted to show you this specifically so that you could see what to do when this happens. So if we add 1 to the number being rounded, which is the 9, then we get a 10. Well, you can't just stick a 10 in there. What do? Here's what you do. You kind of put a 10 like this, and you have to add it to it. So what we're going to do is all the numbers to the left are going to stay the same, right? So we're going to get a 10, 8, 2, 1.4. Now watch this. I have to add a 1 to the 3, so that becomes a 4, and then I have a 0 up there, okay? Because remember, I made that 9 go up to a 10. So that's going to be 0, and then all the numbers to the right. This is the last step right here. All the numbers to the right go to 0. So there we go. And then again, if I have decimal points and then I have zeros to the right, I can eliminate those. Now you can write them if you want, but you're kind of wasting your time. You don't need the zeros, but you can write them if you want to write them. So let's now say this number. So now we have 10,821 and 44 hundredths. Okay? So that's how you would say that number right there. So you can kind of rewind that, replay that, practice that, and then do your work in your book. The last thing that I really have for this lesson, I know this is a little bit longer lesson. Typically I get these lessons done within 12 to 15 minutes. This one's going a little bit longer. The first lesson they try to pack a bunch of stuff in there. I'm just reviewing. You should know all this, right? This is not hopefully groundbreaking material. You should know these things because you've learned them in elementary. But here we are trying to go back through them just to make sure that you remember them. There are 4 operations in arithmetic. So you add, subtract, multiply, and divide, right? You should know that. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I just want to go through each one of these real quick. It won't take long, but let's talk about adding first. If I had 7 candies, I love candy, so that would be nice if I had 7 candies. And I added 8 candies. So I have 7 and I add 8. Then that gives me 15 candies. Each one of these things has a name. The first number, the 7, is called an addend. In addition, the second number, this 8, is also called an addend. And here's the cool thing about that. You can switch those. So if we said, if we switch that to 8 plus 7, that also equals 15, right? So the addends can switch around, no problem. And then the answer to an addition problem is always called the sum. S-U-M. Sum. Not sum like some candy, S-O-O-M, right? Sum, S-U-M. The sum of the two things. All right, now subtraction. And this might be a little bit hard to see. I'll try to, that's a negative sign and that's an equal sign, right? So in this subtraction problem, we have 10 minus, right? That's a minus sign. 4. 10 minus 4 equals 6. This first number is called the minuend. The second number is called the subtrahend. And this answer is called the difference. Now watch something. If I switch the minuend and subtrahend, watch what happens. 4 minus 10. Whoa, that's different. If I have $4 and I take away $10, then I actually have negative $6. I don't have 6, I have negative 6, right? So this changed everything. You cannot switch the minuend and subtrahend. In addition, you can switch the addends, right? That's why they're both called addends. But here, minuend, subtrahend, you have to keep them in the same order. The minuend always has to stay the minuend. The subtrahend always has to stay the subtrahend. Okay? If you wrote it down like this, you'd say 10 minus 4 equals 6. Maybe you're used to seeing things like that. So this one here, the 10 would be the minuend, the 4 would be the subtrahend, and then the 6 would be the difference. Okay? So always keep them in the same order. Next is multiplication. So the first number in multiplication is called a factor. The second number is also called a factor. Remember what I just said. What if we switch this? 4 times 3 equals also 12. Because the factors can stay the same, right? Just like the addends, they can switch around or stay the same. It's going to give you the same answer. This answer is called your product. The product of the two factors, okay? The next one, the last one that we'll talk about is division. And then I'm going to, again, I keep telling you real quick, this is a longer lesson. Trust me, they will get shorter. This is called division, right? And so there's 3 different ways to write a division problem. This is a division problem that maybe you've seen it written like this, maybe you haven't. So I have 32 divided by 8 equals 4. Maybe you're used to seeing it like this. So you have 32 divided by 8 equals 4. Or you also can have fractions, right? So fractions are division problems. So in this fraction, you have 32 divided by 8 equals 4. Now in any of these cases, remember, you can't switch them around. The 8 is always what's called the divisor. The 8 is the divisor. So in the first way, that would be the middle number. In the second way that we wrote it, it's the number out front of the sign. And the third way, it's the denominator of your fraction. Okay? So be careful on that one. That one kind of moves around a little bit. The dividend is the first number when you write it out linear. It's the number inside of your division sign, and it's the numerator of your fraction. Okay, so be careful on this one. This one's tricky. The quotient is always going to be your answer, but we do write it in different places. So your quotient always is your answer. So dividend is your number. That's going to be your number that is being divided. Your divisor is the number that's doing the dividing, and then the quotient is the solution to your question. All right, last thing that we'll do, I want to just walk through, because sometimes this is probably the one that gets most students, that trips up most students. We want to do one division problem. Okay, we're going to do one division problem here. So what we want to do is, and you may have learned it a different way, I'm going to kind of show you the way that I learned it. It's kind of a pretty standard algorithm here to solve this. The first step, and I'll write these over here, the first step, number 1, is going to be estimate. Okay, EST, I'll abbreviate it. So what is estimate? Estimate is where you take this number and you kind of guess how many times do you think it might go into that number. So 3 goes into 8 2 times, right? because 3 can't go into 8 3 times because I need a 9 for it to go in 3 times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, this number, 384, goes into this number, 883, right? Because we have 3 digits and 3 digits. We don't want to go all 4 digits yet because this is going to be bigger than a single digit. The answer will be. So I'm going to say that goes in 2 times because that was my estimate. Now what I want to do with the steps, step number 2 is actually like divide. So you're actually going to divide this into this, right? Step number 3 is we want to multiply. I want to multiply this 2 times the 4, this 2 times the 8, and this 2 times the 3 and see what we end up with. So 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 8 is 16, and then 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7, okay? Step number 4, I kind of want to check and make sure that I did this right, so I'm going to subtract these numbers and make sure that my number is lower and that everything worked out. So I have to borrow here because I can't subtract an 8 from a 3, so I'm going to borrow over here to a 7, so 13, that goes 5 times. And then I can subtract 6 from 7, and I get 1. And then I could subtract a 7 from an 8, and I get 1 again. Now, step 5 is compare. I want to make sure that this number that I got right here is smaller than this number that I have right here. If it is, then that means that I did my division correctly. And it is. 115 is smaller than 384. So now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say what I'm going to do. Step number 6 is what's called the bring down. I'm just going to put like a down arrow. That's kind of a bad down arrow. There we go. Bring a down arrow. So I'm going to bring down my next number. My next number is a 2. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to estimate again. So I want to estimate, in this case, look, I have 4 numbers down here. So I'm going to estimate my 3 into my 11. How many times does 3 go into 11? Well, 3 goes into 11 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. It doesn't go in 4 times because that would be 12. So what I'm going to try here is I'm going to try a 3. Okay? So now I want to do, remember I'm going back up to step number 2. It's almost like when I'm done here, I go back up to the top, right? So I estimated, now I'm dividing, and now I'm going to multiply. So 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 1 is 25. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. Look what I got, these matchy-matchy. I love it. So now I subtract, and I get 0. I compare, I have, it's lower, right? And then I bring down, but I don't have anything to bring down, so I'm done. This would be my solution. So 23 would be the answer there. All right. And again, I know I told you, I'm like, you know, that was a little bit longer video than normal. Trust me on that, okay? I promise you they will be shorter than that. But in this first one, I really wanted to make sure that you kind of got all this stuff. There was tons of stuff packed in there, but I wanted to review it all so that you would know how to do it, okay? So that's all I have for you. I hope you have a good one. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.